Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. My name's Sarah and I'm a flower farmer in Yorkshire in the UK, and we create lots of exciting stuff, exciting content on the farm, which is mainly based around growing flowers. So I will do the odd video about how to sow specific things, how I'm planting stuff out, how I'm planning my flower beds, taking cuttings, coppicing my trees, planting hedges. There's loads of different stuff going on the farm usually, and then usually we will chuck in a few DIY projects as well. So this shipping container was created by my husband Rob and myself, and we've done a few little projects like that I have posted on my YouTube, which are really fun to make, and I would love it if you subscribed so you could watch those videos. So that little introduction out of the way, I just wanted to talk to you today about seed sowing. So today is the 16th of Feb and I have been starting off my seeds. You can probably see them behind me. I don't ever start my seeds usually before the 14th of Feb because we are getting the optimum amount of daylight for plant growth past the 14th of February. So that gives me time in January and the earlier part of February to plan my flower beds and make sure that everything is in order, ready for the seed sowing to commence on the 14th of Feb. And also it's Valentine's Day on the 14th of Feb and we love the plants. That's why we like to get seed sowing on Valentine's Day. It's a lovely activity to do on Valentine's Day. So what I want to talk to you today about is how I'm kind of planning my flower beds. I've gone through this a couple of times before, but if you missed those, I'll kind of sketch over it, and if you want any more in detail tips about that, then just write me a comment, or if it's something that's commonly coming up, then I'll make another video on that. So yeah, I'll just go over how I am calculating how many plants I'm going to need and what's going where, etc. And then I'll go over the seed sowing techniques that I use and the kind of methods that I have stuck to now kind of in the last 3 years. That hasn't really changed much, so I'm kind of happy with the way that I am sowing my seeds, and I'll do a bit of experimenting here and there, and there's actually something that I'm going to experiment with this season that I'll fill you in later on in the video, but that's exciting. Hopefully it will benefit the plants. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is create really healthy plants and healthy soil and things. So lots of my videos recently have been based around kind of trying to get into regenerative farming. I'm still really new to it, but I am constantly trying to take in as much information as I can to try and learn more about this technique, because I really do feel like it's the way forward for farming in general. I really think that people need to start regenerating the soils to create that microbial life that goes so well hand in hand with growing things. So I'll get into that later on in the video, but I just want to talk firstly about how I'm planning my beds. So if you are familiar with the layout of the farm, I have 2 flower fields, both 1/4 of an acre in size, and my original flower field that I started off with is based at the front of the farm and has the teepee on where we run workshops and things, and that field has evolved to be more of a perennial kind of shrubs, flowers, etc. Anything that's perennial gets to go in that front field there, and that's creating a bit more of a low maintenance field up there, and also is building up our stock of perennials, which is kind of only just coming to fruition because at the beginning of my flower farming journey I didn't have much money to put into perennials. So in the last couple of years I've been able to invest, been able to kind of sow seeds and see those plants develop over the last few years. So last year I started harvesting quite a lot from the perennials, which was really great, and it was a massive help actually, especially kind of earlier on in the season when I didn't have many hardy annuals, etc. So yeah, that field is perennials, and then the field around the back is where I am growing most of my annuals. So that field is has my polytunnel and a greenhouse, And I actually just purchased another greenhouse, so I'm going to try and squeeze in around the back there. But for now, one tunnel and one greenhouse, and then it has 10 30-metre by about 1.5 metre beds. No, not 10 beds. It has 8 beds which are 30 metres long by about 1.5 metres, but those beds are the 30-metre long beds are each split into 10 metres. So in total I have 24 beds, and I need to make a plan every year to just make sure that I'm sowing enough to fill up that flower field. So mainly today I'm going to be talking about that flower field around the back, and I have a little diagram here that I drew, which is kind of like a map of the field, and each bed is numbered, so it goes from 1 to 24, and then hopefully there you can see where it says where the polytunnel is situated, so you can kind of see the orientation of that field if you are familiar with it from my videos. But if not, it's not too important, so it doesn't matter. So the beds it's a little bit tricky, because if you watch my video that I made a couple of months, or maybe last month now, about putting the drainage into this field. So this field has notoriously been wet over the years, and I'm trying to make it a bit more of a nicer environment to grow flowers in. It's still a relatively new flower field. I've only been growing in it really for 2 years, so this will be the 3rd season that it is growing flowers. But this area towards the back, where the back fence is always wet, and this winter we put drainage in, and we hired a digger, put a big drainage pipe in, and hopefully that is going to allow the water to run away from that field. So in the past, the flowers that are grown to the latter half of the field have been kind of a little bit more of a poor condition than the flowers at the front. So what I'm going to keep that in mind, and also keep in mind the area where the new drain is, which has obviously been very heavily compacted, probably by the digger. The soil has been obviously turned on its head, so there isn't going to be much life in that soil, and I'm not expecting great things from that this year. So I'm wondering whether to actually just not grow in the beds which have the drainage pipe in this year and put a cover crop in instead. But then obviously I have to think about sacrificing those beds for not being able to grow flowers in. But I kind of think that any crop is a cover crop, so we might have to think about which crops might be more beneficial to be putting in to sort of double up as a cover crop. Yeah, so I'm going to go through these beds. I've made kind of like a wish list of the flowers that I want to grow. I've got all my seeds waiting here, so I need to work out the plant spacing and how many plants can fit in per bed. So here I've got a list of things that I am considering growing in the field, and the numbers of plants that I will need. So I've got written up here that if this plant spacing is 9 inch, then in my 10 metre long by 1.5 metre wide beds I will need 180 plants, and then in my 12 inch spacing plants I'll need 110 of those to fill one bed. So going into things like snapdragons, I'm going to plant them 9 inch spacing, and I'm going to soil block them because they're a nice small seed that responds well to being in soil blocks. So in this list I've put either soil block or seed tray. Basically I've learned whether it is soil block or seed tray by experience, but generally it is small seed versus large seed. So if it's a large seed, so for example cornflowers, kind of a medium sized seed, but it's very fast growing and I want it to have a little bit more space, so I'll put it in a seed tray. And I've got 90 of those because I'm going to be sowing half a bed of cornflower, half a bed of corn cockle, because for me 180 plants of cornflowers is probably going to be too many. I tend not to pick them much because they are really annoying to pick. So if I can half and half that with something else that has a similar kind of behaviour, then those two will go well together, and then they'll probably finish flowering at the same time, and I can pull those out and replace it with something else. So then sunflowers, they require less. So the reason I've put 108 there is because I'm going to sow 2 beds of that. That has a little wider than 12-inch spacing. It has 18-inch spacing, and I only require 50. Half of 108 is 59 or something like that. I only need 59 of those per bed, so then times that by 2, you get 108. So basically I've gone along like that, and I've got 24 beds, so I just need to plan what's going where. So then when I have planned that out, obviously I'm not going to be sowing half hardy annuals yet. I'm just sowing hardy annuals because they can tolerate the colder weather, etc. So I'm going to be sowing the hardy annuals first, and I have already actually sowed hardy annuals, the smaller seeds, in these seed trays. So I've sown snapdragons. I've sown some foxgloves actually because I want to see whether I can get them to flower in autumn, and then some larkspur, some rudbeckia, and some cynoglossum. I think I've said that. I'm not sure whether the cynoglossum is going to do well in the soil blocks. It hasn't in the past, so I might have to resow that in seed trays. So then I've also got quite a few perennials in here in the mix as well, which will be stocking up the front field. Maybe I'll put up a list of those things so that you know what perennials I'm sowing. This is just an example of my soil blocks. So this was started a couple of weeks ago, and they are tomato seeds. So basically what I'll do is I'll sow the seeds into the soil blocks, and then once the seedlings start touching the lid, then I'll take the lids off and then just put a small amount of water into the trays. But I'll just go into a little bit more detail now about the soil blocking, because I'm sure you guys will be interested in the method if you don't know about it already. So this is my seed compost. It is Sinclair seed mix with vermiculite, I believe, and I've actually been trialling. This has peat in it, but I have been trialling some peat-free compost, and I'm quite pleased with the results so far. So I think I'm going to switch onto that next year. It's a little bit more coarse than this because this is just really nice, fine, lovely stuff that can just go straight into the soil blocks. The other peat-free stuff's kind of a bit more coarse, so I'll probably sieve it first before I use it into soil blocks, but this is fine, it doesn't need sieving. So I've got 8.5 of these tin buckets in this big bucket here, and then I've got these worm castings, so I'm going to put 1.5. These are the worm castings, so gorgeous and black. I'm going to put 1.5 worm castings into there, and I'm going to mix that really nicely. So I think the reason why I'm putting 15% in is because there's been a lot of research in the past about the percentages of worm castings that you put into soil mixes and things like that, and I think it's been shown actually that anything more than 20% has a detrimental effect on plants, but anything up to that has a really positive effect on plants. So like I said, I can't wait to see what the plants look like when they germinate. I hope they're going to be really healthy, and then afterwards I can make a worm castings tea from these worm castings and spray that onto the seedlings as well, just to make sure they're super healthy and happy. Right, so I need to wet this down. It's kind of got quite a bit of moisture in it already, but I just need a bit more for it to stick together. And usually it kind of looks like a bit of a brownie batter. But let's get some water. And don't forget, you can always add it, but you can never really subtract it unless you add more compost. So I'm just going to be careful that I don't add too much at once. So I'm just going to take a scoop of this actually and test it in the soil blocker. Got a tray here. So I'm just going to tip it into the tray and see whether the mixture it's kind of hard to do with one hand. That looks good to me. I think that's kind of a good consistency. So I'm going to use this tray to tip out some of the compost and then use my soil blocker in here. I find it miles easier to make it on a flat surface, and you can kind of compress the soil into the blocks and then just smooth it off at the bottom. And make some nice tidy looking soil blocks. So what I'm doing is I'm using these Tupperware boxes, which are like some old takeaway boxes, and you can get two of these in. This has 20 soil blocks in it, so if I put one soil block group in there and then I can put another one in there, so each tray holds 40 soil blocks, and then I'll put the lid on. Oops. And that keeps the moisture in really nicely. So then I will take the lid off when the plants start reaching the top of the lid, and then at that point that's probably when I want to be potting them on, because they will start drying out because of my neglect. But I mean, if they're in a warm position, you really do need to keep an eye on them, because they can dry out in a matter of hours. So yeah, that is the point where I would like to be potting them on if possible. I don't like to mess around with really faffy kind of soil block mixes, although I am going to be experimenting a little bit with some of this stuff, which is mycorrhizae, and I'm going to be putting, I think it's something like a teaspoon per litre for sowing seeds in, and this contains loads of fungal spores, so they will be going into the seed compost mix, and then I will be feeding with a little bit of this humic acid. I need to just figure out how the mix is going to work, so I won't share that with you yet. I'll share that with you later once I've done a few tests and things. The humic acid feeds the biology, so it's not feeding the plant, it's feeding the biology. So when we plant those plants out into the field, the plants will already be established with a fungal connection, and that will be going out into the field and hopefully fostering more kind of fungal and microbial activity in the soil. So I got this idea from Jenny Love from Love and Fresh Flowers, who has the Regenerative Flower Farmers Network. So I'm learning lots through being a part of that network. The other thing that I'm going to be testing out is adding a little bit of biochar. So Jenny mentioned that if you have problems with trays drying out and things, then adding a little bit of biochar will help with that. So in the past, the reason why I haven't always enjoyed doing soil blocking is because unless they've got the lids on, I find that they dry out really quickly, and I can't manage to be keeping them watered constantly. So if I can add something that's going to really help with moisture retention, then that will help even more towards enjoying a little bit of soil blocking, because It's kind of easy, it saves a lot of space. So back here I've got about 1,500 or 1,400 seeds. If they were all in the large seed trays, they would be taking up an awful lot of room, and I only have 2 greenhouses and maybe a third one. So yeah, it saves a lot of space. Obviously I am going to have to pot these plants on at some point because they can't live in the soil blocks forever, but it kind of just delays that until all of my seeds are going and I've got a little bit more time on my hands. So this week we're having a couple of really bad storms, so that is why mainly I've got these soil blocks in here. I would normally have them out in the greenhouse. I've never had LED lights and grow lights and things like that before, so this is new to me. These Tupperware boxes are on a heat mat, and can you see behind me? There we go, we've got a thermostat, and I'm keeping those at 20 degrees. So Rob's just walking by and smiling. So yeah, I'm keeping those at 20 degrees, and hopefully that will make for some happy germination. However, I haven't always had this set up, and I've always done it in my greenhouse before now, and the plants have been fine out in the greenhouse. So it's good to have a heat mat, but you don't necessarily need it. So usually the seed packets will say something like, however many weeks before the last frost date. So I think our last frost date is the last week of April, although we have had frosts in May before that have been caught out by. But count back from your average last frost date. You can find that online if you just Google it, and then make sure you are sowing on that date prior to then. And then if you are considering doing successional sowing, then consider the dates to maturation that are usually on seed websites. And that is when your plant will start flowering, and then you might be able to harvest for kind of like 4 to 6 weeks of that plant's life, and then it will kind of start being a bit tired. So that's when you want to start harvesting from the next crop. So if you want a continuous crop, take that date into account when you have calculated that your crop might be finished, and then count back the days to maturation. And I think Johnny's Seeds actually has like differences between whether you direct sow it and whether you transplant it, so take that into consideration, and then sow on that date. So make sure you are working backwards on the calendar to be able to have your successions of flowers throughout the season. I hope that makes sense. If not, then please put it down in the comments and I'll try and explain it better typing it up. So I hope that covers everything to do with seed sowing, and if it hasn't, then please leave me a comment. I kind of didn't really plan this video, I just kind of started just talking to the camera, so hopefully I've managed to cover everything. Happy sowing if you are sowing, and I hope you have a really successful season ahead. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye bye.